I'm Joan Bigham, and I'm one of the co-founders of Aegis for Life. This is and just a quick background for those of you who don't know who we are. Just a couple of years ago, Lyle Yorks, who couldn't be here tonight, but all of you know Lyle, we talked about the fact that we wanted to have a little bit more cohesive connection between the cohorts of Aegis. And so in 2015, we began discussing it, and several people in this room were part of the founding. Leotis, where's Leotis? He was part of the original committee, and Tej, of course. And Tej and I have gone on to be the official co-founders for now. We're looking for replacements from anyone who'd like to take our places. But we've now done 3 in our series of tributes to Jack Mezirow. This has become our signature event. Many of you have been to all of our events, and we thank you for that. The first one, we were very excited to have Ted Fleming come because he had known Jack Mezirow and worked with him. And we had a very personal presentation from Ted covering not only the transformative learning that affected his career, but also his knowledge of the origins of Jack's theory. And then last year, we had a very special presentation, and Michelle is here tonight. Where are you? And he spoke to us about time, a beautiful presentation, beautifully illustrated presentation, making it very memorable. And he has since finished his book. So congratulations on that. And we're proud to say that you may purchase a copy. We have some copies here, and we're very happy to share them with you tonight. This evening, we thought we'd shake things up a bit.
At a steep discount, if I say.
Oh, I should have mentioned that.
Yeah.
The Aegis only discount. And then when we were talking about tonight, we thought, what could we do that would be a little bit different? We wanted to stay, of course, with the transformational strategy and thinking, and we began to think about journeys and our own classmates and the journeys that they had taken and how we could think about transformation on a more personal level. I mean, we sent some invitations out, and we were very fortunate to have our panelists agree to join us tonight. And Tej will be our moderator. And so I'll introduce Tej, and then he can introduce the rest of the panel. Tej is actually a technologist as well as a doctor of adult learning and organizational learning, and has spent most recently his career in healthcare management, looking at data-driven transformation across the healthcare field, and he's done some very innovative work. But his new passion, which he'll share with you, is something he calls Curriculum 2.0, and that is preparing people through a new way of looking at education for more balanced living, more balanced learning, and better preparation for jobs that look across the silos of the organization. Did I get that right, Tej?
I will write that down. But she said it way better than I ever do.
So that's my presentation for tonight, and I just want to say thank you for coming. Welcome, panel, and take it away, Tej.
Thank you, Joan. And you know what? I am thrilled to see you all. And I got some feedback this year, so we will do better next year. And one of the things we will do is we will make sure we get the date out for this event. Because I was talking to Victoria, and I said, since we've done 3, I think this is going to stick now. So we're going to get this date out in advance so more people can come, and we can make this a real community. I have some announcements before I go into the panel. We are the youth that's joined us with Aegis 26 is bringing the excitement for a new event. So in October, we will be adding an event which will be our mixer. So we will get the date out for that, and we will get more details out for that. Roshan here is helping with that event. Yeah. The next thing I want to kind of announce is, big event coming in November, which is our Transformational Learning Conference. And prior to that conference, we have a pre-conference on learning cities. You might hear more about that. So I'll send out an email about the early bird discount that will expire on June 30th. But register for that. That should be a huge kind of event for us.
And there is a student discount.
And there is a student discount too. Unfortunately, those that graduated don't get the discount. So if we had known that, we would have extended our graduation. And some of us are very good at that. And then the last thing I want to kind of announce before I get into the panel is, this is something that we have really passionately championed. Victoria has championed it. We have set up a scholarship in Jack and Ed.'s memory, and we will welcome contributions to that. I will put out a little, and by the way, you can donate online and all that kind of stuff. But I'll put this out, so please consider, because we do want to make Jack's legacy more permanent than we represent. So.
And may I just add that at this point, the college matches anything that people contribute. That will probably no longer be the case at some point. But right now, if you can donate, we're almost to the point where we really have kind of like a minimum amount of money to be the baseline for a permanent kind of endowed whatever. So I would really, any amount will be welcome. So we know that everybody here is not a millionaire. So adult learning is not a millionaire occupation. But if you have $10 or $25 that you're interested in contributing, and if you can contribute more, that's all the better. But anything is welcome. So thank you very much.
And by the way, talking about adult learning is not a million. What I've realized is that the business school says pretty much some of the same things we do, not as well as we do, but their price tag is exponentially higher. I am trying to deal with that dissonance, but enough of that. We are really looking forward to this panel discussion. I want to thank the panelists for taking the time and coming here. And they're going to talk about their transformational journeys. And the reason I think at this time this is important for us to hear and reflect and contribute is because we are at this amazing time. We're kind of coming to the end of the second decade of the 21st century. And some of the things that were transformative for us in terms of the liberal values, bringing the world together, are now having some unanticipated effects, where I think the capacity to critically think and discern what is being said is very important. So what I'm hoping for is that as we listen to these transformational journeys, we are inspired to help the world create those journeys for themselves. And that's really kind of where we, Joan and I, as we thought about the panel, we said, who better to do that than the graduates for the Aegis program, who are amazing practitioners and doing amazing work in the field themselves. So I have with me today 3 great folks, and I'll go in cohort order. Okay, so we'll start with cohort 11, which is Professor Tej Maltbia, and Terry is an associate professor in our program, in the Aegis program, in the ALL program. He also has an amazingly successful coaching program, which he does in conjunction with the business school. Okay, and we've seen a lot of cross-pollination between those 2 programs, and it's really a very good bringing together of disciplines, and the coaches that graduate from that program go on to do amazing work as well. We then have from Aegis 19, Dr. Kevin Johnson, and Kevin has been the president and CEO of Philadelphia Opportunities Industrialization Center. And he's kind of developed new workforce training. And this is important. I hadn't looked at this in great detail, but imagine we are at full employment right now, at least according to what I read. But at the same time, I would say the majority of people still have a sense of nagging insecurity and fear. And we need to find ways to get new talent really performing. So Kevin does that, but that's not all he does.
I'm bored.
And this is really amazing. He is the founding lead pastor of the Dare to Imagine Church. Okay, I just like the ring of that, Dare to Imagine. And it has grown from 20 to 650 members. And we're just looking forward to hearing from you, Kevin. And then last but not the least, we have from Aegis 22. So we have 11, 19, and 22. We have Dr. Connie Watson. And you will hear from Connie, but Connie has been on this amazing journey of cooperative inquiry. And right now, she is working with the Goldman Sachs Small Business Program, where she is working with small businesses that range from businesses that have 2 employees to businesses that have over 50 employees, and giving these businesses the skills and the capacities to not only do good for themselves, but to do good for the communities they are in. So it's an amazing panel we have here of transformation and social action. So I just can't wait to get started. And you're saying, so stop, Tej, get started. So we're going to start with Terry. And by the way, it's really hard for me to sit down. The folks that know me are already seeing Tej. He's already leaning in his chair and things like that. But I'm going to ask this question to all of you, starting with Terry first, Kevin next, and then Connie, and then I'll mix it up. And the question is, what was the journey that led you to Aegis?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me if it's here? No. All right. That's why I thought I would check. So that's a big question. As I was thinking about the question and preparing the thoughts, I think almost everything that I did prior to coming to Aegis really was part of the journey, but I won't bore you with all of that. But right before Aegis, I was sort of a mid-career professional, started in sales right out of undergrad, sold B2B sales, went to sales management, then had a job in sales training and development, which is really the trigger for my meeting Professor Victoria Marsick. I actually saw a flyer. I was taking a certificate program at NYU, and I saw a flyer for a master's program in workplace learning and development, and I called Victoria in December thinking I was going to get her voicemail. And I got this pleasant voice, and I was disoriented because I had to speak to a person. But in many ways, that really was a significant part of the journey for my becoming part of Aegis, because that was in December. That January, before even becoming a part of the program, she talked me into taking 2 classes as a non-matriculating student, and the rest, as they say, is history. I actually, while in that job in sales training development, once I graduated, I left a corporation that I'd been with for 15 years and actually became a consultant, worked for 2 consulting firms, one in process improvement. That was actually in the early 90s, so TQM, Total Quality Management, and so on was really popular. I got bored with that after 2 years and then worked for a sales consulting firm, which was also pretty exciting. And then I ran into one of my mentors from a company that I worked for since undergrad, telling him that I was about to come back. I wanted to go back to school. I was going to join Colgate Palmolive because I thought that would be easier. And he said, why would you do that? Come back and work for us. He didn't have a job, so they made me a special assistant to the president of the company, which was actually kind of cool. Did project work, but they also gave me an offer that I couldn't refuse, which is basically said they would pay for Aegis. And not only would they pay for Aegis, they would give me time off. So those of you who went through Aegis know it's 3 weeks, which is a lot of time to get off. And they actually paid for the dissertation, which I wouldn't have been able to afford if I were a traditional student. So they actually had me travel around the country and study diversity practitioners. So the way I got to Aegis was really, I thought Aegis would be a way for me to get really clear about my personal point of view about people, how people and organizations learn, change, and grow, which was my passion. I actually did something that you folks told me not to do, which is I took a promotion a year after being into Aegis, which was a huge promotion, which required a lot of travel. So I'll pause there. Everything in life brought me here. was interested in people development, and I think Aegis helped me do that, and I'll talk more specifically, I'm sure, later in how that happened.
So many of you might not know this, but one thing just became clear to me now. I always wondered why Professor Maltbia or why Terry took so long to do his dissertation. Now I know he was getting paid. Kevin's.
Well, now that you said that, long is relative, because there actually a person in my cohort that finished in 3 years. There was one that finished in 9, and that wasn't me. So I actually was in the middle of my cohort, just to be clear.
Precise. Kevin, same question. Thank you, Terry.
First of all, it is so good to be back here at Columbia. I don't know how long it's been since I walked through these halls, but as I walked through the halls, I just said, wow, I missed this place. So thank you so much, Joan, and everybody else for the opportunity to come back. My journey, I'm a first college graduate for my family, and my grandfather, who's still living, he's 92 years old. He only had a third grade education, but he would say to me as I was growing up, the more you learn, the dumber you get. And I did not know that they actually had a doctoral degree in that stuff. So I share that with you because I have always been a lifelong learner. And when I was looking at doctoral programs, I was actually over here at Union Theological Seminary pursuing my Master of Divinity degree and working at this church in Harlem called Abyssinian Baptist Church. And while I was there, was looking at what I wanted to do. And one of my professors at the time he just passed away this year, about a month or two ago, Dr. James Cone, who is the father of Black theology and Black liberation theology. And I remember being in Dr. Cone's class, and I was blown away with what he was talking about. And I was like, great, I'm going to pursue a PhD in liberation theology. But there was a problem because I'm also a minister. I've been preaching since I was 16 years old. And for me, the theory was not enough, to have the theory and to hear what he was espousing. How do you take that to the church? How do you really begin to free people so they can think creatively and think in a very critical way? And I remember asking Professor Cone in class one day, I said, how can you make liberation theology practical and not just an isolated academic discourse? And so he looked at me like, who is this little guy right here? And then he came back, he said, it depends on who your audience is. And he said, my audience is the academy. You have to find out who your audience is.
Very nice.
And that led me on this whole discovery, because if I'm going to pay for this degree, I want a degree that I'm actually going to be able to use. And so that's when I began to look at the religious education program that TC had with Union Theological Seminary. And I applied, I was admitted, but there was one problem. I was also married and still married, and my wife wanted to go to law school, and somebody had to work, which that meant me, because I wanted to be married. And so took a job in Cleveland, Ohio, and even though I was admitted into the program, was not able to continue because we were in Cleveland. But then Reverend Butts asked for us to come back here to New York. And I was looking for a program, but the religious education program, along with Union, was no longer in existence because the professor had retired. And I was like, oh my God, I would have been in a program with nobody to get me out. And so I started looking through the catalog and just trying to find a doctoral program that spoke to me, that was also interdisciplinary, and that would help me with my quest with trying to really help transform people's way of thinking. And I came across Aegis, went and talked to Lyle, and the rest is history. And how Aegis has really kind of come into existence for me, and you'll hear me talk more about this, but really it was a door that really allowed for me to really develop the skills. And I remember, hearing from Jack when he would come to our, cohort class, and that in and of itself led me on this journey of how do you really begin to help people to expand their way of thinking. And I haven't written a book, but now that I got a little bit more time, critical faith learning is a coined phrase that I laid out in my dissertation. And it is, how can people of faith take what they know, but then also look at it critically and help it to evolve. And so that's my journey that led me here to TC.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Connie, same question to you.
Can you hear me okay this way? Okay, great. I know I don't have a problem with that. So Ellie was just asking me before I came in here about family and parents, and earlier than that, we were talking about Michelle's class and him having us write our bio. And so I think it does start at some extent about what you're looking for and where your path leads you from a young age, which I also found out in my dissertation, by the way, to be true. So I think my mom got her GED later in life and then was a massage therapist and yoga instructor. And my dad was a psychologist therapist. And so I went into organizational psychology and did my master's thesis on workplace wellness. So I feel like I integrated that pretty well. I worked in training and development for a while within a university context, big universities, and I started in student leadership, and I did that, and then I started teaching at a community college in Michigan. And I just loved that. I mean, that just really opened up a new world to me. But of course, I had never been taught how to teach. However, I'd been in training and development, which was very much practical, experience-based, working with adult learners. And so I really enjoyed pieces of that too. So as I started thinking about how I wanted to evolve and grow, I decided I didn't want to do a straight psychology doctorate. I wanted to do something, especially as working with an amazing group of students, but have a lot of issues at the community college level, and especially in the two community colleges I've taught at, from at-risk neighborhoods, and a lot of issues in their lives, and not high graduation rates or transfer rates. And so what can I do for me to evolve, but also in ways that I could help other people evolve? And I took way too long to figure that out. I must have looked like for a year and a half at somewhere to apply. But again, so keep doing this. I called and I got a real person, Lyle, on the phone. So that works, right? So I'm so glad you're answering the phone.
Right.
I thought, that real person is talking to me here. And I could talk to another student, and this was in New York. So I applied, and my first year I traveled from living in Michigan. And my second year, my husband just had an opportunity, luckily with his work, to transfer to Philadelphia, where I was like, oh yes, now I can just take the train. So that worked out really well, and I moved community colleges. So I guess I also, you're not supposed to move or take a new job.
Or have a baby, which I did.
But it all works out. So I also think I was looking for that connection with other people who also wanted to learn and grow. And then I'm sure I'll talk about that a little bit later, but the collaborative inquiry space and working with other women, doctoral students who kind of wanted to put the professional and personal growth together in some way. I didn't know that was going to happen, but that was a bonus for me, is that this was the right program.
Great. Thank you, Connie. So my next question for all three of them, and this time we'll start with Kevin, go to Connie, and then come to Terry, is how did you experience Aegis? And Cohort 26, I know you're here, and if these answers sound different than what you're experiencing, I just want to tell you the rhythm of time, some memories change. So use that as a backdrop.
Yes, as I look out, I see obviously Joan, and I see Donna from my particular cohort, the best cohort in the world. Just kidding, just kidding. But I think that, the professors do a very good job of putting together a good cohort. My cohort, there are people from everywhere. At the time, I was living here in New York City, but we had, I forget her name, she was coming from Japan. Mieko. She was flying in. And we just gave her an award. You flew from Japan just to come here to this program. We had other folk, coming from everywhere else and different disciplines. And it created a good environment for, not just for me, but I think for all of us. And what I was the biggest kind of takeaway for me going through the process was, even though I'm coming from a church kind of faith-based perspective, how learning there was also impacting learning in other disciplines. And so it provided for some rich dialogue, as I'm pretty sure all cohorts have experienced, but also it created a community. And I recently ran for Congress in PA, and they changed the congressional lines, which kind of altered things. We were not successful, but and I'm still experiencing Aegis. And the reason why I say that is because a number of my cohort members and even professors, they donated to the campaign. And so for me, yes, it was political, and I'm trying to change, the world. I need to make sure all those people in Congress come to TC in order to do that. So I'm still experiencing Aegis. And we started in 2003, finally finished in 2008, the dissertation. But you will continuously experience Aegis because Aegis is really for life. And so for me, it has been the best experience in my life academically, and it's something I'm continuing to experience even as I have been away from this great place.
Thank you, Connie.
It's like, where to begin? How long do I have with this answer?
We're not timing anything.
Well, I think it was just such a good time in my life where I needed, I know to sound cliche, that holding environment. And I was ready for it, and it was intense, and it was tough, and I was stressed out, and there was wine and crying and like all sorts of things. But I just think, the opportunity to put yourself in a challenging situation, and some days push back, and some days embrace it, and over the journey, trust the process, where you end up is a beautiful thing. And so I think, a big part of that were obviously the professors and my peers, my family, the people at work. All those people that kind of help and support you. And I remember the last session, being really moving. Like, what are you're graduating now? We still had our dissertations, but what are we supposed to do? And just like, I don't know, but I want to go out and do good, right? Whatever that means. And so I'm still trying to figure out what that means for myself, for my family, for my community. But I think just allowing to stretch yourself and have conversations with people that are interesting, surprising, insightful, engaging, needing that. Rita would say this is our spa for our mind or something, or a boot camp for our mind. So needing that in my life, I really think that filled a gap for me in some ways about needing something like that to push me a little bit in a direction. And it did all that. So, but yeah, in the moment, it can be very different. What am I doing here? Yeah.
Connie, I wondered if you wanted to correct Kevin's assertion about the best cohort.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't have to feel pressured to do that.
Why don't I say, in my knowing, in my perspective, I have a best cohort as well. It's just 21. In my way of understanding.
Terry, same question. How did you experience Aegis?
Yeah, similar. Three ways, really. One is the power of the cohort, so I'll say a little bit about that. One that was pretty surprising, I think, is because it wasn't really what I thought I came here for, is learning to think like a researcher. And probably even more surprising was to learn to be respected as a researcher and recognized. So the power of the cohort, just to say a couple of things about that. One is I don't think I would have finished without it. And I'm very clear about that, actually, because 2 people in the cohort literally said, who had finished, said, you're going to come to Florida, take some time off of work, and get this thing done. So to me, that's really reflective of the power of the cohort. It's not just what happens in the classroom, but really taking accountability for the people who are in the cohort. Lots of other things that represented the power of the cohort, but I think that's a key message. Learning to think like a researcher, where it really hit is I was working in corporate, had been in corporate since undergrad. So everything for me was practical results, outcomes, et cetera. And so I really was coming here for a credential, not so much, and to clarify my point of view as a learning and development professional, but not so much to change the way I thought. But the most important thing, I think, was really just that. Probably about halfway through, people at my workplace start listening in different ways, start actually taking what I had to say seriously, I think, and importantly, start asking for my point of view. And I think a lot of it had to do with just not asking or actually telling, but I actually found myself asking a lot more questions before responding. And so they actually helped create a readiness to listen, which I realized I was doing a lot more talking before and saying things people really weren't interested in. The whole thing about being recognized as a researcher is, like Kevin, I was one of the first people in my family to get to a certain level of education attainment. And given my background, I came to this experience with a sense of impostership. So although I had been accepted in the program, somewhere deep in my mind, and by the way, we were in this room, and this room looked very different. In fact, this room had portraits, and no offense, but this room had portraits with a lot of old white people. And mostly male. And that actually accelerated my sense of impostership because I wondered, how in the heck did I, this kid from the Midwest inner city, a place where we affectionately used to call the projects, it was Brand Whitlock Homes, how did I get here at Columbia? So someone would eventually discover that they had made a mistake and mixed up my application with someone else's. So that was a sense of impostership. To sort of wrap that up, though, being recognized as a researcher, I finished this thing called the dissertation and thought I was relieved. Right after the dissertation, I was enjoying my summer for the first time in a long time, many years. And my boss called me in August and said, you need to meet me in Dayton, Ohio. And she didn't tell me why, but long story short, we were going to do a merger, so we were acquiring a company. And right after that call, I got an email from Victoria, which I tried to ignore. And then I got a call when I got back to New York from Victoria, saying, "Hi, Terry, what about that email?" So she encouraged me to apply for an award, which was the Malcolm Knowles Dissertation of the Year Award, and it was our dissertation, because your advisor is an important part of that, so it's not just my dissertation. And actually, I would bring in my cohort members as well, who pushed me through, but our dissertation actually was the first qualitative dissertation to win that award. So for that, Victoria, I'm grateful.
Thank you, Tori. So we've done before Aegis, we've done Aegis, and now we're going to talk about what the journey has been since Aegis. And Connie, we'll start with you this time, go to Kevin, and then come back to Terry. Cool. So what has that exciting journey been? What does Aegis 26 cohort have to look forward to?
Well, I remember someone from the cohort before saying to me, you're going to graduate and then you're going to expect like all these things to happen and just be patient. And so that was really true for me too, because you have now so many ideas, maybe some new confidence, I definitely hear you about the imposter piece, all the way up to like walking up with my robe on. I'm like, do you think they're going to call my name? Like, am I going to be sitting there in the church and they're not going to call my name? And I didn't really graduate. So I was glad that didn't happen. I think that I had to really think about and be intentional about what is it that I want to do, and I still wasn't quite sure. Because I really love the discussions that I had and the research I had around social justice issues and identity development and all this kind of work. But I was, some of the opportunities I was getting didn't necessarily fit that. And how was I going to work that out? So it took me a little while to kind of figure out that I don't have to stay as a community college faculty to do good work. And there actually can be a marriage between business and economics, right, and social justice. And I could really start learning what that looks like. And so that's been a really exciting journey for me and thinking about that, which brings me to my current position. But I would have to say, as you were saying, never really left Aegis. Right. So right away, a good friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Leo Scott, had this idea for this think tank, Learn Long Institute, about how we've learned so much and we're interested in continuing the conversation and making the world a better place in some way. How about we just start with us, like continuing the conversation? Without that little think tank that's grown a few more people each year, and I hope it continues, slowly, as a space that continued to work for me, I don't think I would have written. So I wasn't in a research-intensive university, right? Now I'm on the staff and workforce development side, but I've still written 4 chapters. And I don't think that would have happened without that. And then also we started the collaborative inquiry, which we affectionately called ourselves the diversity divas, because we like laughing at ourselves about being divas, and we wanted to learn more about diversity, so we thought that fit pretty well. And that group really showed me that I had a voice and that I could also integrate my voice with others. And in a practical way, how do you make shared meaning? And so I think that where I've come from, I continued this work in other ways, in other kind of holding environments, through that collaborative inquiry group in space, through the think tank, now through this. And then I'm still learning and growing, and that whole idea of what you don't know, or you keep getting less smart the more you try to learn, right? And just feeling more comfortable with that, and then saying, what is it now that I need to work on next or learn next? But I think I could say more, but it's probably a good place to stop.
Thank you, Connie. Kevin.
For me, so let me just kind of start off. I probably broke all the rules here. You were told not to have children. I didn't have them, but I did participate. But we had 2 kids during the process. Right. And then we moved, not too far, but just down the road to Philadelphia. And I share that with you because the move to Philadelphia has really opened up various ways for me to really apply this degree. One was in the space of church, which is very near and dear to my heart. And I went to this church called Bright Hope Baptist Church. It had a famous pastor. He's now deceased. The late William Gray, Bill Gray, he was also a congressman. And I succeeded him there at Bright Hope. But the problem with the church is that they had not really moved forward. They viewed themselves as progressive, but they were not. And so at that time, I was around, it was 11 years ago, so I was 33 years old. And to come in, and this was a congregation that had 3 only 4 pastors, 3 of them from the same family, and the 3 from the same family had been pastors at church for 82 years. So you have this young guy who's 33 years old, who has never pastored a church before, has been assistant pastor but never pastored a church before, trying to bring them into the 21st century. And that was a very daunting task, because when you have this extreme history, you have this former pastor, who was the first African American to be chair of the Budget Committee under Reagan. He was a Democrat, but also became the first African American majority whip. They had a sense of who they were. And so you have this 33-year-old guy trying to share with them how they can do church in the 21st century. It created some tension. And so I had to really rely upon, I didn't tell them it was collaborative inquiry, but that's what it was. I didn't tell them it was action learning, but that's what it was. But I had to really begin to engage them. And in the African American church, I'm pretty sure for a lot of churches, but definitely the African American church, women make up the majority of the congregation. When you look at it from a business model, they are the funders for the church. And that was problematic for me, not because of women, but because they were not in strong leadership. And so I'm proud to say that in those 7 years that I was there, I was able to move that we were able to get the first woman to be chair of the deacon board, which was huge because that's where the power is. And then 2, we were able to get the first female chair of the trustee board. Again, that's over the money. So again, through the learnings here in Aegis, I was able to combine the theories here along with what I learned at Union, and began to try to move the church forward. Then some would probably say I tried to move it too forward, which led to a decision that I had to make. I had to leave Bright Hope, but it gave birth to something else, which is a church I started called Dare to Imagine. And that church has grown from 20 people now to nearly 700. We just purchased last May for $2.2 million, nearly 7 acres of land. We have a beautiful facility. And I really didn't want to do that, but it was, that Dare to Imagine really came because of being in here and really kind of reflecting upon there has to be something else to this. And also part of this, and this gets around to the workforce development, because I need to eat. When I left Bright Hope and a nonprofit called Philadelphia OIC, they asked me to be their CEO. And it was in very bad shape when I arrived there. We focused on workforce development. When I arrived there, we just had one program in hospitality, and we prepared men and women to become chefs, to go into front desk operations and housekeeping. But the problem with that is that those individuals only make about $11 an hour, which is about $23,000 a year, and nobody can survive off of that. And so we put together a very robust plan to begin to expand workforce offerings. And a lot of that boiled down to adult learning, because I had people who were coming to the program who could not do well in a GED program. And then that led to us starting an alternative school, because we knew we had to start much earlier because we were not having the success that we needed to have in the GED program. And we started that program, the Philadelphia OIC Workforce Academy, and the first cohort, or the first class, just graduated yesterday. We had 33 to graduate, so very excited about those young people. But it also created other opportunities, in which I was able to create a program called BankWorks, which we now have there, which it's a people come, and for like 8 weeks they get the training in the banking industry, and all you have to do is have a high school diploma or a GED. You get trained and you move forward. I share that with you because I am now on a mission really of utilizing this EDD really in the sense of empowering people so that they can create real economic opportunities for them. In Philadelphia, we are the largest big city that is so poor. Our poverty rate is 26%, and for me that's not acceptable. And so the best way for me to be able to address it is to address from an educational standpoint. And so the people who I am working with or those between 16 years and older, going all the way up to, say, 60-something years old, but try to find lanes for them where they can get the learning that they need in order to provide for themselves and for their families. And I will say it's because of being here in this program that it has allowed for me to be in other thought spaces, to begin to think about how can we apply this. And it gets back to the question I asked Dr. Cohn, because for me to have a doctorate and just to be in a theory is not enough. I must see that theory become action in people's lives. And so that's how we're applying it now.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Terry, same question to you.
Yeah, so what's been the journey post Aegis? Almost immediately, I mentioned to you that summer, my company at the time announced a merger. And so I didn't know it, yet this whole notion, mergers are full of opportunities for disorienting dilemmas, where people's whole lives get turned upside down. So in addition to being on the transition team, I found myself having lots of conversations with people, helping them make sense of the experience they found themselves in. And Aegis really well prepared me for that reality. So that was sort of chapter one. The great news about the merger for me personally is, although much to the chagrin of my mentor, I took a buyout. So I got 2 years of salary, which was great, plus retirement. And when I announced it, they asked me to stay on a year, an additional year, to be a transition consultant. So they gave me another year of severance, and so I wound up with 3 years of salary. And I say that because it provided the security that I needed to do some exploration. So after leaving Westvaco at the time, it's now called West Rock. They've merged 3 times since then. So notice the only part of the name that's left is West. They were Mead Westvaco and a couple of other things, and now West Rock. So I was an independent consultant for 2 years and loved that, actually, because I really was leveraging my dissertation research. I was actually, I didn't call it coaching at the time, I called it consulting, but I was actually working with people who had been promoted to the chief diversity officer in Fortune 500 corporations who had no diversity experience, but a lot of credibility in their organization. And so really helping them with both the knowledge and the strategic identity that was associated with the role, and some of the surprises that came with trying to organize culture change in an organization that espoused a certain type of change, but really was committed to having things stay the same. I think Aegis really prepared me well for that reality, talking to them about how to navigate that and also maintain the sense of who they were. So did that work for a couple of years. At the same time, I was doing some adjunct work around here. And Victoria and I kept having lots of conversations. So I joined the faculty here, I believe it was in 2006. So I just completed 12 years here at TC. Probably the thing that was most surprising for me, the teaching aspect is pretty typical and straightforward. The advising, pretty typical and straightforward. But as I entered here, there were some faculty having lots of conversations about starting a coaching program, a coach certification program. And they had about 4 courses, I think, between two programs in coaching. And I asked, how long have you been thinking about this? And they had been thinking about it for 5 years, which seemed like an eternity to me. And I didn't really know anything about coaching, but in my prior world, I knew a lot about how to create programs fast. And so I literally took their syllabi from their 4 courses, put a group of graduate students together and looked at what was known in the field. There were about 40 professional coaching associations at the time. I also realized once we decided the audience we were going after that while I had a lot of commitment personally to TC, that the name was a barrier to the audience that we were trying to attract. And so I walked across the street to the business school and said, I see that you have coaching in all of your flagship programs. What if And what's your biggest challenge with that? I knew what it was already, and that was finding high-quality, consistent coaches when you have 100 people in a program and you're trying to do it in a day versus multiple days. I said, what if I could point high-quality graduates to you from the program, and at the same time, in exchange for that, you allow me to use your brand for our coaching program. So
Did you double the price?
Actually, we charge more than any other non-credit program here. And our pricing strategy is really complicated. I look at what the business school charges for a week, and I subtract $2,000 from that. Very complicated, but it actually works. So today, so that was fall of 2006. We launched the program in 2007, so it took a year, not 5. And we now we're on our 21st cohort, where we do 2 cohorts a year. We're about to graduate cohort 20 in July. We have over 500 graduates from 50 countries and counting. We entered the market as the most expensive non-credit coaching program in the country, and we now have wait list of 80 to 100 per cohort. And I think all of that is because we have a very clear, people think what they're learning is, what they come for is coaching, but what actually differentiates our program is our learning methodology. And they come just like I came for something and got something else. The same is true for them. They actually come to learn how to coach, but what it actually does is transform who they are as people, as professionals, and they really understand the impact that they could have on thousands of lives. And so not only have we launched the coaching program, we now have a biannual conference. We're about to have our 3rd biannual conference. And we had 150 the first time. We had about 350 the second time, and we're on track to have well over 450 this time from different countries. And we started a alumni association, so that hopefully will continue the legacy once I leave here. And importantly, last year we launched our Global Talent Alliance, so we're now providing coaching services to Fortune 500 corporations. So what started off as an idea, literally months, and I see one of our clients in the room and former advisees. So another way that Aegis continues to give and grow and you never leave it is Tiffany Dobson was actually one of my advisees. She loves it now because she's my boss. Because we're actually providing custom coaching services to her organization. And actually, I have a number of stories like that of people who actually went through the program, and that's another fascinating thing. We actually had people, Cynthia is actually in the room. Cynthia,
she left.
Oh, she left. So Cynthia Russell went through the coaching program.
Pierre as well.
And then, as a result of that, discovered Aegis. Pierre went through the coaching program, was actually my colleague at the business school, was doing marketing then, and went through Aegis. And so it really works in multiple ways. We've had people that went through the coaching program that went to XMA, our Executive Masters in Change and Consultation, another program in the department. And so the other thing I would say is that none of that was planned. So when I left Aegis, I had these grand ideas of what I was going to do with the degree, and what I've done since then is nothing like I imagined, and I wouldn't change the script if I could. So
I was trying to take notes while Terry was talking. So I picked up 3 things. One was, Aegis transforms you where you can figure out how to make salary while you explore. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is how to get graduate students to get stuff done really fast. That was the second thing I learned. And the third thing was like some difference between higher ed and corporate, 5 years thinking and then 1 year operationalized. Did I cut off? So that's something to build upon. So what I want to do now is, I have 2 things that I would like to do. One is, I was going to ask another question, but for interest of time as to, what your hopes and desires, I'll pause that. And I want to open up to all of you with two opportunities. One is you can obviously ask our esteemed panel any question you want, and you can share some things from yourself. Many of you, some of you are going through Aegis right now. Many of you are Aegis graduates yourself with interesting stories to share. Some of you are now, doing great work elsewhere. So I want to open it up to all of you to ask questions and share. And we will do that until the wine runs out. Okay, and we have, and I love, and we have our Oprah with the mic.
Oprah is plural.
We have two mics.
Hello everyone. My name is Rohan Chen. I'm an EDD candidate in Adult Learning and Leadership. I actually have one question for Terry. I know Terry has been here for a long time, first as a Aegis student and now a professor in Adult Learning and Leadership. So do you witness the differences between the Aegis at that time and the Aegis now? So has the mission of Aegis changed like over time? Thanks.
I think all things change, so change is a constant. And actually, I've been here longer than Aegis. I was here for the master's program. So when I thought about when I first came to TC, it was shocking the other day. I first joined the halls of TC in 1989. So I've been here one way or another as a student twice, and now as an employee for a long time. Aegis has, I wouldn't say the mission has changed, nor I don't think the mission of adult learning has changed. Yet so many things around us has changed. And you made the comment about one lesson that you got derived from my last set of comments was doing things fast. I would also say doing things different. I think higher ed is undergoing a transformation, whether they want to or not. And that transformation is part of a broader system, which is the world is going through a transformation, so how could higher ed not go through such a transformation? So I think the experience of Aegis, the experience of the Adult Learning and Leadership program, the experience of Adult Learning and Leadership, and frankly, the experience of Teachers College is all being disoriented and disrupted by those changes. And so I think our current challenge, I think the challenge before us, is how do we adapt and be agile to respond to the new demands of new students and the new worlds that they find themselves in, while at the same time maintaining the legacy and the things that really made the Aegis experience, the all experience, great. So I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that's an easy task, yet I think it's a real task before us. So sure, it's different. I could see some threads. I think it was a lot more stable. I thought we were going through change when I went through Aegis because there was a new president. I came in when Arthur Levine had been here, I think, for about a year, and I came right as he had threw all the departments up in the air and reorganized. And so we were experiencing a bit of disorientation, I think, as the faculty and others were adjusting to that. I think that seems like a small change compared to what's in front of us. So I wish I could say I knew exactly how it's changed and changing, yet all you have to do is, unfortunately, watch the news or try to avoid the news to know that change is very real. I think what we have going for us is we do have a solid foundation upon which we can leverage. But yeah, I think it's very different.
I think there's another question there and then one at the back. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you, esteemed panelists. It was lovely listening to your stories. Really exciting stuff. I guess I really like the reference to you start the program thinking here's how it's going to play out and nothing goes according to plan. Right. So what is your advice for us as we are at crossroads with life and work and Aegis, and what would you recommend to us as some of the things that you did to be completely present and take all this amazing learning we're getting? Because sometimes it just feels like it's slipping away.
I could jump in. So I think find something that you're passionate about and move forward with it, even if you're not sure. And don't spill water all over yourself. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Even if you're not sure that's the direction it's going to take you. So having something, thank you, that I'm passionate about really helped me with Learn Long and my colleagues. It gave us a reason to come together. So this idea of exploring learning cities, which is an international movement out of UNESCO, like took me to, we went to Scotland, we went to Mexico City, we wrote and did research together, we met people from all over the world, right? And just this one little idea, I want to do some writing and I want to explore this a little bit. And so, you know, even though, you know, I'm not running a learning city center or something, that experience has really helped me. And now that I'm working with entrepreneurs, surprisingly, there's these big connections about small business owners who employ over 60% of the workforce and who are passionate, they're grounded in their communities. I mean, I didn't know this whole group. And I didn't start getting interested in learning cities because I want to know more about entrepreneurs. But I picked something I was passionate about, and I picked people I loved to work with, and I trusted, and knew that we would do good work together, and then I kept my eyes open for these opportunities. And then my boss, my current boss now with the 10,000 Small Businesses Program, said, "It's like you were born to do this job." And I was like, you know, it kind of is, because of all the different experiences I had, and it makes so much sense, and I never would have picked it. So go with something you're passionate with, go with it, see where it takes you, and keep your eyes open for opportunities. Oh, and surround yourself with the people here, right?
Any other thoughts, Kevin or Terry?
I'll just kind of add a couple of things. For me, to get through the program, I mean, obviously you have, you know, good support systems, obviously, with your colleagues. But it was very important to kind of, you know, make sure that you scheduled in a vacation because this is a very stressful program. And it was also, you know, trust me, if I could have held off on us having children, I would have. But I'm glad that they came when they did because they provided a sense of, you know, you're so focused on this, until they reminded you that there's another life out there. And even if you don't get the doctorate, but you will get the doctorate, that there's another title that you have. And so for me, as I look at, and I was reflecting upon as I was coming up here, because I was like, oh, they just had graduation here, and I see the balloons and everything. And probably the photo I love the most is when I'm holding my children, and for them to experience and to see their father in his doctoral robe graduating from Columbia University, to me that made it all worth it. So I would just say experience what you're going through, surround yourself, as Connie has said, you know, with good people, but also to include your family in this process. Because believe it or not, even though they won't walk across the stage, they need to walk across the stage because they're helping you get through this process as well.
There was a question at the back.
Hey all, my name is Achilles. I just graduated a few weeks ago from the master's in ALL, but a lot of the professors that you guys have, we had. So I feel that I didn't go through Aegis, but we shared an experience. I have a quick story that I'd like to share and a question for the panel. I think that this story truly embodies the value of the program. When I was starting to work on my master's thesis project last year under the guidance of Professor Bitterman, she gave me a few samples, and one of those master's theses that she gave me to model mine after, or to just take a look at, was Professor Maltbia's. And I think it was like 1994, 95. And I'm reading through this, and I think it was about like he's teaching philosophy. And I had already taken one of his classes, and once I'm like done reviewing it, I see him in the hallways, and I tell Professor Maltbia, I saw your thesis, and I wonder if you, because it was about teaching philosophy, I was like, I wonder if it's still the same. And his answer was, well, I hope not. It only goes back to the fact that we're constantly changing and evolving. And I mentioned that story because Professor Maltbia, in that moment, in that hallway where I saw you, and I was meeting with my research partner, that had an impact on me because it gave me license that somebody that I admired and that had done so many things was willing to deviate or walk away from things that you had written a few years ago. And it gave me license that it's okay, that things that I might put on stone, it's not necessarily on stone, it's on paper, and it can continuously evolve. And that goes to adult learning. That is at the core of who we are as adult educators. But my question is, I just went through a period of interviewing for a lot of jobs. It ultimately led to a job offer this week, which it was great. So the ROI on the program is right here. But my question is, going through this whole journey, I interview with people in the corporate sector, in nonprofits, in all sorts of sectors. And my experience was that as I talked to them about a lot of the theories that I learned in my program, a lot of these learning and development professionals were very interested, but also a little blown away and a little surprised. And it all worked out. But it led me to think, I came into the job interviews thinking that all the things that we were learning were like widely known or that people already followed them. And so I wanted to know from you guys in the field, is this something that you've experienced as well? And the question, as I continue going into the field, is how do we talk about adult learning in a way that, in many of my cases, had to then sit there and explain. I literally had someone at TED take me through. She was a teacher, and she's like, well, I know you've done all of these things within training and development, but you haven't been a teacher. And I try to explain, well, I manage classrooms, I manage learning settings, but this wasn't necessarily connected. So a lot of the things that we're learning that I assume was widely known among people in our field, it wasn't my experience that it's necessarily true. So how do you deal with that? How do you explain what we do, and how do we brand, to Professor Maltbia, how do we brand ourselves in a way that others understand it? Yeah.
Who would like to take that?
Well, one thing, and you and I have had several conversations. One thing I would say is I never tried to teach them the theory. And so I think one of the things that we have to learn to be marketable is how to translate. And one quick story I'll tell you is that I start using the language that I was learning in the program shortly at work. And my boss, who was also paying, said, I'm paying for you to get the degree, but don't do that. Meaning don't use all that with me. I don't want to know that. So part of what I needed to learn how to do is translate. So you don't have to teach, you have to connect. Right? So that, to me, that's the, so it doesn't need to be widely known. And I think the other, and I think it relates to an earlier comment about what's our advice. Where is she? She's in there. Her question about what's your advice about getting through the experience. I think part of it is we rely on the faculty to, quote, teach us, and part of it. And there is this gap internally between our espoused theory of learning this stuff and internalizing it. So my best advice to you is just that, to learn how to internalize what you're learning, not to talk about it. Because if you internalize it and you authentically get it, your participants will get it. And I think that's actually why we have people coming here to want other degrees, because we never say, oh, go to TC and do this, et cetera. They experience it from us and they want some. So I think that would be my advice. I think trying to sell it is way too hard. Yeah. But embodying it is hard, but it's something you have a lot of control over.
Where I work in this It's at the Community College of Philadelphia, and then Goldman Sachs is the funder, and then Babson College started the curriculum, which of course has evolved at different sites. There's 15 sites around the world, and in the U.S., and there's a national cohort in Boston, and so we probably had about 7,000 entrepreneurs go through it. In Philadelphia, we have 401 alum and 27 in the cohort. We call it invisible theory. And so we say what we're doing in the program is we call our entrepreneur scholars. And we say there's this invisible theory that we've weaved in through the whole. And how we talk about it is mindset and skill set. When you leave here, we want you to think about how you've grown in your mindset and your skill set. And that seems to really resonate. And then the people who want more, ask for it. And then I can get all nerded out and get into all the stuff, and it's fun, and tell them to read this chapter, this dissertation, and but yeah, it's I really like how you're saying, kind of embody it. Yeah.
And I would just say, it's kind of like what you're asking the question to some degree that I asked Professor Cohn. The question you're really wrestling with is, who do you want your audience to be? Because if you want to deal with the theory, you're going to be selling it to people in the academic world. But if you're going to be on the ground level, then you can't bring that language. You have to, what Terry said, is connect with them. And so that's really your real question is, do you want to be in the academy, or do you want to be, on the ground level? Because if you're on the ground level, to use that language, you can't. You will know it, but you have to be able to translate it to them.
I think just another, and then there's a third space, which is what I call the translator or the bridge, or a scholar practitioner.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so,
yeah, for sure.
When I'm teaching here, I use the theory and concepts. But when I'm working at J.P. Morgan Chase, I'm actually using the concepts. But I listen a lot so that I can speak in their language. Otherwise, I wouldn't be asked back again, right?
Right.
So part of the work is, if you're going to be in that scholar practitioner space, is really learning how to do what I call code shifting, being able to talk like an academic and talk like a business person, and being comfortable in both.
Question? Yeah. Oh, so we have one here first, and then we come in. So the Otis name.
Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. I think I wanted to. I have a question that I'm really thinking about, and so if you could really help me with that, and I think it builds on what we've already talked about. My question really is, in some ways, people who come into Aegis, you already have some degree of profession or expertise in the background that you're in. So you had some sense in business and had some sense in psychology, had some sense even in the faith community. And so even in this Aegis process has in some ways helped you be more clear about that or help you in those different directions.
Yep.
So I wanted to pause the idea of experience coming into Aegis and to just look at Aegis specifically and to say, and not that we're all clean slates, but let's assume we were. If we were a clean slate and we were to go into the Aegis program, what would be, in essence, the areas of practice that we would pursue? What would be the courses? What would be the programs that we would definitively say from the Aegis experience prior to whatever I had before, this is what I think I am equipped to do?
It's a very deep question.
Well, I wonder about the premise of that question, actually, because, seriously, the reason why I say that is because the whole premise of Aegis was based on some assumptions. And even going back to Jack's early work of reentry, so the whole idea is people were coming in, so you weren't bringing a blank slate. So I think to change the premise would change the I don't think this program was designed for that. So I think it would be a different program, and you would have to create a program. So I'm not trying to escape the issue, but anyone who's taken a class from me knows that I have this sort of heuristic around context, content, conduct, and context matters. And so there's a context in which Aegis was created, and therefore it works. And so to try to take Aegis out of that context, and you would have something else. So I think you can do some things and learn some things, but I think it would be a different program. And so if I were trying to come up with people who were a blank slate, I would design a different curriculum. I wouldn't apply Aegis because I don't think it would work, because it's all based on drawing on the experiences that already exist. So I think the premise, I would have to shift my premise to even engage in that question, given what I know about the origins of Aegis and why it works.
It's interesting because as you were saying that, I was thinking about my answer, and the first thing that popped in my head was like, to be your best self, because it's kind of like you take what you need. But given that, there's some commonality, and you had talked about that earlier in terms of research, right? So there are some commonality. Be a great question for alumni, right? As what is it that you feel more ready to do, more confident in, that skill set and mindset piece? How have you grown? And I think there is some commonality in that in terms of research and connection. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go here and then Joan will come to you. There was a.
Add to that because
Oh, Joan, you wanted to add to this? Okay, go
They
ahead.
need the microphone for recording.
not the question, but the thought that it may have to do with the framework around helping people learn from their experience, and also kind of the addition of the adult development framework. Mm-hmm. Because I think although everybody comes in with their own frameworks,
understanding what it is for an adult to learn and grow and develop over time, I think that's at the core of what we do, and that would be for the person and also the context within which they are. So it would be individual, group, and organizational or societal, et cetera. But it seems to me that that it may be the framework within which to examine one's own life experience and understand it in a different way, to be able to position yourself to kind of move forward, to grow deeper or in new directions. It's a practice what you preach, trying to create a process, which Jeannie does very well, that takes you through examining your life, but not just from the same old, but trying to create and add some frameworks. The leadership framework, the adult development framework, the learning from experience framework, the transformative framework, that these are frameworks within which you kind of re-examine your experience, your life, and your trajectory, to kind of move forward. And, I just put that forward as a hypothesis to consider.
Good, thank you. Joan?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
On. I just want to make a comment from a purely practical point of view, building on Leotis's question, because when I went to look for a doctoral program, I was older. I'm older, even older now. And there were very few places you could go. And I spoke to Claremont, I spoke to California, I spoke to other programs, and they said they wanted people who could become professors. Yeah. So to earn a doctorate at one of the finest universities in the country, in the world, at my stage of life was really not possible because I wasn't looking for an academic career. Right. So I think Aegis is extremely important because it is a mid-career program. It is very unique. I know this because of my own research, and it's not about what you will become. I believe it's about how you will live your life differently, whether you change careers or not, which I did not change then. I'm actually changing now, 10 years later. but it changes the way you live and the way you do the work that you do. And people asked me when I was in school, well, when you graduate, what will you do? And I had to say, well, I'll just be doing the same thing I'm doing now, but with a different wisdom, with a different way to communicate, with a different meaning-making capability, which I learned from Aegis. So I wanted to give you the practical point of view.
Good, thank you. There was a question here.
I sort of feel like, I don't belong, or.
Oh, you
like-
do.
You do
Yes.
So my name is Marissa Harris, and I graduated from a program, a Teachers College graduate program, in 1978. I'm probably.
Good for you, yes.
And this is the first alumni event I have been to in 40 years. So.
Welcome.
And I've never heard of Aegis, but I did read about am I pronouncing it correctly? Okay, good. But I did about the transformational journey, and that's what brought me here. I graduated with a 60-degree master's in counseling psychology, and I took that into corporate America, first in training and development, and then in human resources, and I picked it over a psychiatric center, which would have paid me more. I was a single mom, because I was interested in people who wanted to transform their results, people who wanted to create something bigger and larger, and I felt that business, because it touched everybody in some ways, was just the best place for me to learn that, and that they were in some ways interested in learning and research if it could improve their results. And I was very fortunate to be one of the pioneer companies in a process called the Balanced Scorecard, which took an underperforming, sick company at the bottom in its industry over a period of 5 years to number one worldwide. And then I was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and entered into a world that I knew nothing about. And I was told that absolutely nothing could be done for me. I was going to die in 6 months. But I decided that what I'd learned about transformation and creating success in the business world, well, in some ways I think I didn't have any other choice, was that I'm going to apply that kind of thinking, the kind of being, almost like a culture change, which is really a personality, a value change, a mindset change to this diagnosis. And here's the question I have is really, because now I'm in that world, or attempting to create a mindset for that results that what looks like impossible, reimagining the possible. I love that. For not only doctors who are devastated in their careers and what's happening, but also patients. Patients feel so disempowered in terms of that. So I think one of you, here's my question, I thought one of you mentioned something about being in the area of healthcare, I forgot, or interested in it, and I'm really interested in, your beingness and how you see that as a possibility of transforming both the patient and the physician experience in the world of medicine and healing.
Yeah, that's it. I'll take that one. That's a great question. And healthcare in the U.S., and it's hard to talk about healthcare globally because it's so different everywhere. Healthcare in the U.S. is complicated because it is such a big part of our economy, and everyone says that a third of it is wasted. And we cannot do anything about it. And the reason we can't do anything about it because every dollar of waste in healthcare is a dollar of income for somebody. And that somebody that has that dollar of income belongs to a group that is organized in a special interest and is spending money to lobby to protect that interest and keep everybody else out of that space. So what does that mean for patients and doctors? So for doctors, what that means, and I want to not use the word doctor, but use the word clinician, because there are clinicians who are not doctors who can do a lot. So what it means for clinicians and for patients, and bring it back to this program, is there are those clinicians who, in spite of the program, are thinking differently, are transforming themselves, and in their groups, building capacity for themselves to operate differently, and then empower their patients. And what does it mean for patients? What it means for patients is for them to now build the capacities of thinking through their care as they are not victims, but they are in charge of their care, and to activate their inner strength to get the care that they have already paid for and that they deserve. And when they ask for it, they will get it. And there is research that is there which shows that. But we as patients and we as clinicians don't have that mindset. So it goes back to that mindset. So I'm sorry if I hope I try to provide something.
I'm not, I haven't worked in that field directly. However, we've had a couple of physicians who have actually gone through our program and were attracted for that very reason. So the systemic issues are big, but they weren't really dealing with the systemic issues. So I go back to mindset is actually more important than skill set. I would argue skill set is important, but skill set without mindset is actually suboptimized almost by definition, because if you can't imagine it, you can't realize it. And so what I'm learning from this very established physician who was hired by a firm actually and got a grant to literally transform medical education in this region of the country is the reason why he came from he knew how to train people, but what he was interested in is how to transform mindsets, because he believed that that's what it was, and he thought that he had to start with himself, and that's why he came to the program. So I would say that while there may be insurmountable systemic issues, or at least they feel that way, our subtext of the program is transforming organizations one leader at a time. I think that's what you have to think about. I think the system will feel overwhelming if you allow it, yet I think you can help individuals transform, and I've seen people graduate from our program who have done amazing things because of their mindset, not what we taught them about coaching. That was an enabler.
Peter.
I'd just like to follow up on what Terry said and what you said, and I was trying to think of that, and of course, I'm the least qualified of all the people in the world, but I've been lucky enough to be able to watch Terry and Victoria and Jeannie and Lyle, and I would say the core element of Aegis is not what is taught, but that the faculty are self-transforming. And I remember what Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. And I don't think I have to say a lot more.
Thank you. So with that, I'm going to call the panel to the end. I want to first of all thank Kevin, Connie, and Terry for being with us. Thank you all for coming. We will see you at the Mixer. We will see you at the Transformative Learning Conference. We will see you at the pre-conference on Learning Cities. And please, let's keep in touch. Let's keep going. And please don't forget, if you can, whatever you can contribute to the Jack and Ed.D. Scholarship Fund.